Alright, so if you're looking for an alternative to the Sony 16 to 35 G Master lens, which comes in at $2,100, you might want to take a look at these two lenses right here. This is the Sigma 16 to 28, and this is the Tamron 17 to 28. This lens has been out for a few years now, and the Sigma just came out recently, so there is some advantages right away with this lens being newer. Probably has a little bit better autofocus, but don't let that fool you. The Tamron 17 to 28 has been kind of a tried and true lens for the last couple of years. So today I came to Disney Springs. I'm joined with Paul Feinberg here. We're just going to walk around, do some photography, do some video. We're going to be shooting all the photography on the a7 IV, and we're going to shoot all the video on the Sony a7S III. And then also we are going to be using the same ND filter on both lenses just to keep things even, to make sure the look stays the same. So let's go check out these things and see how they compare against each other. So first off, the Tamron comes in at $799, which is a better advantage over the Sigma because this one's $100 cheaper. The Sigma comes in at $899, although currently at the time of the filming of this video, this thing is on sale at $839. So far the win goes to the Tamron for the price point. So first let's talk about the video quality on these two lenses. Both these lenses are really sharp, they both have really good autofocus, and they both have really good colors. I do notice that the Sigma has just a slightly warmer color than the Tamron, but really the only thing that sets these two lenses apart is that 1mm difference on the wide end. And as you can see from some of these shots, that 1mm difference doesn't really amount to a whole lot. So just to show an example of a wider shot, this is the Tamron lens right now on this shot, and when I switch over the Sigma right now, it's hardly any different. Really, that 1mm difference on this wide of a shot doesn't matter. And just to show one more example here, this is kind of the wide shot of this fountain, and when we switch over to the Sigma lens, it might be a tiny bit wider, but really it's hard to notice. So both of these lenses open up to an f2.8, which means they're going to do pretty good at low light situations depending on the camera you're using. The one thing I did kind of notice though is that the Sigma lens is a tiny bit brighter at f2.8. I'm not really sure why that is, but as you can see in the shot, at the same settings, it's a tiny bit brighter. Alright, so probably most of you are going to wonder what this lens looks like vlogging. Honestly, this is probably my main reason for using this lens, is having a good vlog lens. So let's check out what this is. This is the Sigma 16 to 28. We are at f3.5. It's pretty bright out here, so I'm going to go with a little higher aperture. This is just me holding it underneath the lens. I'm not using any handheld tripod, and it's fairly wide, I would say. It's probably going to be a little wider than the 17, but not by much. But you might notice that extra millimeter when you're in the focal range this close to a subject. So we are in active stabilization, by the way. Let's just do a quick little walk test. So this is just the stabilization test of the 16 walking around handheld in active stabilization. I think this is a comfortable lens. It's really light. It's not big. Sometimes having that bigger lens though is actually easier to hold on to, I think. Right. But so let's switch over to the Tamron and see what that one looks like now. All right, so now we're on the Tamron. This is at 17mm. Can you guys even tell the difference? Honestly, I can't really see a difference in the screen. Obviously it'll be wider if you're in standard stabilization, but we're walking around with it, so we want to use active. Paul, looks good? Looks about the same, right?
Yeah, I mean, it feels about the same too.
It's about the same weight. These lenses really are just the same weight. They're really not any I mean, there's probably I'll put the weights on the screen right now. Yeah, so there you go. There's your answer. They're very similar. They're about the same size. About the only thing I noticed is that the Tamron is a 67mm thread versus that's a 72mm thread. We're using an 82mm filter, so I have an adapter to adapt from the lens to the filter. And I will say that I noticed on the Sigma that because that adapter is in the middle, it actually pushes the filter out a little further, and it's getting slightly in the frame on the vignette, like in the corners, in some shots. So I'm not super happy with that. So I would say maybe we get the correct ND filter to the lens if you have an issue with wide lenses, because when you're walking around and that stabilization is moving, it'll kind of sometimes show up in your corners. Let's walk around real quick and see what this lens looks like. So it's pretty stable, still in active stabilization, maybe a little bouncy.
Yeah, I would say that's probably like my worst, the worst thing of the lens is not having to worry about the adapting it, because I like using 82mm filters for everything, so I have to buy multiple filters. But with this lens, I feel like you really want to make sure you have the right filters, right size for the lens. I don't know.
Yeah, and that is one advantage to the Sony 16-35 is that is an 82mm, which matches most of my other lenses. So there is an advantage for that. But also, it's a $2,000 lens. What other tests do we want to do, Paul? Should we do some B-roll, slow motion?
Yeah.
Let's do some B-roll. Let's check that out. Now starting with the Sigma lens, let's do an autofocus test with Paul here. As you can see, it's tracking his eye quite well as he's coming towards the camera. And as he leaves the frame, it does go back and forth between them. It does capture him quite quickly. It does lock on him pretty good with this lens, even if going side to side and in and out of the frame. So Paul is doing his best job at trying to lose the eye focus tracking by just moving around really fast. But as you can see, this lens does a really good job at tracking that eye focus. So moving on to the Tamron lens, the one thing I did notice about this lens is it does seem like it does struggle a little bit trying to keep focus with Paul as he's kind of moving around in and out of the frame. So there is something to be said about that Sigma lens being a newer autofocus system and a newer lens. So while we continue this test, I want to mention that today's video has been brought to you by Prime Gear from Peter Lindgren. So go check out the links down below in the description to check out these cool new shirts and hats from Prime Gear. Also be sure to check out Peter Lindgren's other website to sign up for courses for Final Cut Pro, as well as other cool filmmaking tools such as his YouTube courses and his cinematic LUTs. Thanks again, Peter and Prime Gear, for making this video possible. So jumping into the photography side of things, the one thing that I kind of noticed right away is that the Sigma lens just kind of has a little bit more saturation, a little bit more warmth, and kind of has a little bit more sharpness and clarity over the Tamron. Obviously, it has that little bit extra width to it as well, which you'll notice. But one thing I really kind of took away though is that the Sigma just had a little bit kind of a better look out of camera. Now, if you're going into things like Lightroom, you're obviously going to adjust your saturation and your clarity anyways. But that's one thing I did notice with the Sigma is that it just looked a little bit better and a little bit more kind of finished of a photo straight out of camera. And to me, that's kind of a win for the Sigma lens. Alright guys, so that's been my day at Disney Springs with the Tamron 17-28 and the Sigma 16-28. Quite honestly, both these lenses felt very similar to me. One thing I will say is the Sigma's just a little bit sharper in the middle and a little bit sharper on the sides, and definitely that little 1mm difference does make a difference on the wide angle. The one thing I also didn't really like about the Tamron is that the front element on the lens is kind of open. Not that stuff would get behind there, but you do have the ability, if you're on like a beach, that sand maybe could get in there. Versus the Sigma, the front element is completely closed with glass, so there is some benefits of that. Both of them weigh pretty much the same, both of them feel the same, both have very similar autofocus ability, I believe. So really, it's just kind of which one do you want? Do you want to spend that extra $100 to get that slightly sharper image and slightly wider shot? If you're doing a lot of vlogging, I would say probably a good idea to get that Sigma instead, because it is a little bit closer to you, so you don't have to hold your arm out as far. As far as taking photos, like literally you could take a half step back and probably get the shot on the 17 to look exactly like the 16, so really not much of a difference there. But yeah, it really depends on which one you want to spend. Quite honestly, both of these are really good options if you don't want to go with the $2,100 Sony G Masters. So anyways, you guys, that's all I got for you. If you got any questions, please leave me a comment down below. As always, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Later.